The role of language was mentioned before, if you remember. And if you ever learned a foreign language or tried to express yourself in a foreign language, you might know these moments. You want to say something, express something, and where's the word? Where's the phrase to express it? And I teach German as a foreign language, and my students then say, oh, I can feel it, but I don't know how to say. So I'd like to share a perspective with you that shows how moments of stumbling and stuttering, of not knowing what to do and to say, are rich and promising starting points to develop new meaning and a fresh language which bring a change. And if we realize how language is implicit in every experience, situation, and it's implicit in our bodies. So indeed, it's not just a question of language learning or have the right word or grammar structure. Developing new meaning out of uncertainty is part of every learning process. So the situation my students are learning is quite complex and full of uncertainties. They don't know the language, they are not familiar with cultural patterns. They're young adolescents and young adults from Syria and Afghanistan, also Eritrea, Ethiopia, and they have this huge wish to learn a profession and don't know how to realize. They often don't know where the family members are and if they're still alive. They sometimes don't know how to sleep because they live in asylum camps. And they are sometimes confronted with a teacher who also don't know what to do in some certain situations. So their learning happens in really complex situations, characterized by uncertainty and not knowing. So first I'd like to shed light on what's learning, what do we know about learning processes. I'd like to mention three theoretical perspectives which show the role of uncertainty, language and meaning, experiences in learning processes. Though the first is coming from a subjective theoretical perspective, and say learning happens when a subject comes to a barrier and resistance in its usual acting. They point out that these processes include the individual's attempt to find orientation in society through appropriate knowledge and reflection on the individual's interests and social positions. And in this perspective, this perspective of learning meaning is really in the center of interest. So the second theoretical perspective is coming from psychology of knowledge, and they distinguish different systems of knowledge. It's just declarative knowledge which exists in words and meanings. So we have situative, episodical, procedural, sensomotor knowledge as knowledge out of situations and routine acting that does not necessarily exist in language. So, but the transformation of pre-verbal knowledge into language becomes necessary, for instance, if my students have to talk about their practice, the practical experiences in their apprenticeship, if they have to explain what they did. They know how to do, they know how to prepare a food, to build a wall or to paint it, but they have to talk about as well. They have to bring this knowledge into language. So the third perspective is coming from experiential learning, and that points out that experience is the source of learning and development. Learning happens in the process of action and reflection and with conflicts, and it includes thinking, perception, behavior and feeling. And deep learning really needs to integrate all of these phases. So what we know about learning is it starts if the subject struggles, if there is an uncertainty, a barrier, a not knowing. And learning is a process which deals with the complexity of situations. Learning causes change and transformation, and it is based on language and meaning. Yeah, I want to go back to this moment of struggling, searching for words. So let's focus on these moments of stucking and stumbling, these fuzzy and murky moments when one struggles for words to express something. But you feel something matters in a way that can't be expressed yet. These moments can be starting points and lead to surprisingly new steps and fresh meaning, which brings the whole situation forward. There's a philosopher and psychotherapist, he's called again T. Chandlin, and he's really sort of in love with these moments. And he has shown with his research that the one factor that seems to matter most is an awareness to the present experience, situation, and to a bodily resonance. He calls this bodily resonance a felt sense. A felt sense can be defined as the sensing of the implicit complexity of a whole situation. It's like you're sitting here now in your chair, surrounded by these people, the sea is next to us, and you can get a felt sense, a meaningful feeling about the whole situation, about what matters most to you personally about this congress. Chandlin shows then how new and fresh thinking, meaning and language can arise from this felt sense, which is first pre-verbal, it's just a sensation. He calls this philosophical practice focusing, and it is an act to attend with a felt sense, to start a dialogue between the sensing and words. So it's like, okay, I'm here, and what matters most to me to the conference? It has sort of freshness, but freshness like a lemon? No, it's more like a rain. So you can start to act and look, is it what it wants to be expressed? And if a felt sense is expressed in the right way, one can feel a felt shift, he calls it. A felt shift, a bodily felt release of, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what I meant. That's what I want to say. Yeah, it's like a fresh summer rain on a hot day on a beach in Netherlands. That's my sensation of this. So. And this can lead to creative language, which first is not easy to understand for others, but it really carries all this richness of the situation. So but how can we understand this? In Chandlin's philosophy, body and environment are one in certain aspects. He says body and environment interact. Interaction is always first. The body itself is interaction, and it can be felt from inside. So he constructs a body which we can feel our body from inside. In every situation we are with our bodies. Because of this, language is also implicit in any experience. You know, we do something, language is somehow implicit, also we don't say it. And therefore language is also implicit in our bodies. Language is not determining us, it's not a determination relation. Language is implicit as the ability to form sentences from this experient felt sense. So we have the ability to create sentences out of this, to give it a logical structure, what feels meaningful. And Chandlin says language occurs from the implicit. And if this happens, it brings a change, a carrying forward. So it's like if you sense a situation, maybe there's hunger implicit already and eating somehow. And if eating occurs later, soon, yeah, it will change the situation. And it makes a difference if you will eat an apple or a steak. This will change the implicit, all what's implicit in this situation. And so this way it's with language. Based on Chandlin's work, Donate Scholler describes the technique close talking. Close talking is a mode of talking that does not detach from the specific way the situation is felt at the moment. It does not jump to interpretations or conclusions. Instead, it stays carefully close to the felt texture of an issue, a situation, or problem. It is a speaking from instead of a speaking about an experiential process. It means always to go back and sense what has changed. If I can call it a fresh summer rain, it's like that. It changed something in my felt sense. If one developed logical it means to attend the bodily response and then go back to speak from it. So this back and forth movements leads one to notice how the process creates subtle experiential contrasts as felt sensing. And this is very precise. It's not predetermined, it's not arbitrary, it's very precise. This responsive way of articulating conveys an awareness of a situation that leads beyond it. It expands and changes the situation as well as the logical roots of thinking possible in it. The close interaction between verbalizing and felt sensing can be understood as a new way forward in articulating sequences that also shift the experiential process. And this movement is what Chandlin captures in his term of carrying forward. Yeah, so what does it mean concretely? So let me give some examples how this perspective of bodily experiencing influenced my interactions in classroom. And that was first, I started to understand language learning as a continuously process of moving between experiencing and verbalizing. So it's not about you have to learn the right word, but what does you feel, what does you want to express, and let's find a verbalization for it. And let's become more precise. There are great grammar structures which helps to be very precise in German. So the second voice, I became more aware of the bodily presence and resonance of mine and theirs. So especially in difficult moments, we often have like several languages running around in the room, and I created something like, okay, are they explaining something else, or are they arguing what's going on here, for example, or they come in, the first thing I became aware is, did they sleep at night? How is their bodily presence now? What can we learn, or should we just bring them to the situation? What changed, what else is coming out of this is, yeah, I always try to appreciate these felt meanings if they mention and encourage them to develop it, to investigate it. You know, oh, you have a feeling of a word. Great, try to investigate, try to explain it, follow it. And generally, we try to investigate meanings out of all this whole richness of experience. They already know so much, and to include all this which coming from other languages. And also, I try to give implicit aspects which are in this situation words. I try to be able to talk about, and this is sometimes I stand and say, yeah, I notice you want to learn German as fast as possible, and it takes so much time to learn a foreign language. Yeah, or yeah, I realize you came here to feel safe, and your life is so stressful still in a new way. So just it has a place to be said here, and this changed the situation. So. Yeah, so what can we do if we don't know what to do? So my suggestion would be, you could try to slow down, to become aware of your felt sense in a situation, to an issue, a problem. You could try to speak from it, practice close talking, find symbolizations for it. Yeah, and so become a language developer in whatever language. So. Yeah, and just be curious about all that occurs out of it, because it can really be surprising.
Can you put some examples of close talking?
Yeah, this is, well, come to my workshop. It is if you're right here and you try to feel yourself from inside and to get a sensation of what's going on here. You're in this situation, sitting in your cushion, surrounded by people with all these thoughts and new influences. So, and if you ask yourself, so what really matters to me about this conference? Is there coming up which is maybe just a really vague feeling, something like, okay, yeah, and maybe you can feel it in your body, you know, it's like, okay, I feel my heart beating, or I feel happier, or frustrated, or whatever, or it's a pain here. Try to investigate and say, okay, there's something, what does it want to say? It's just always an inviting, so we can't pressure it, but you can invite.
And adding to it, is it that you introduce that in your conversation with another person? When you feel these sensations or frustration?
Yeah, sometimes I can make suggestions. So, for example, if I see my students are really not... I can give you an example. No, I'm not sure if it's about felt sense. But if I feel there is something, I try to give space that it has a place and can be expressed. So there is something that matters to you. Do you want to investigate? Do you want to look at a little bit? And then I reflect back and say, oh, it's like that. And I don't judge it or don't comment it and say, oh no, it's not like a fresh rain. How can you think about that? For you, it's like a fresh rain. Okay, maybe for me it's totally different. But for you, it has this quality. Yes, sir.